The museum holds talks on the fourth Friday of each month between February and November, and the videos are published on YouTube. It's free to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Click the bell to be notified of future talks and videos. Thanks a lot for watching.
Today's presentation will share with us the fascinating and inspiring Medical History Museum at Melbourne University, showcasing the broad, rich art of healing through time. Established in 1967 and previously centred on the history of the Melbourne Medical School and Western medicine, it has a diverse collection of documents, photographs, artefacts, ceremonial objects, and medical and scientific equipment. In latter years, there's been a strategic shift to incorporate the rich healing traditions of Australia's Indigenous people, which span over 65,000 years. In 2015, the museum expanded its collections policy to encompass contemporary Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art. Sharing bush medicine stories through art has become one of the ways in which elders maintained a strong knowledge and culture for their community. Recently, Dr. Jackie Healy oversaw the huge project of moving the museum into a new location with an exhibition, The Art of Healing, Australian Indigenous Bush Medicine. Artworks have been commissioned and selected from throughout Australia. The talk will focus on the newly refurbished museum and the opening exhibition. The updated collections focus on contemporary Indigenous art and materials that demonstrate the ongoing vitality, resilience, and cultural significance of Indigenous healing practices in modern communities. Dr. Jackie Healy is the Director of Museums, Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences at University of Melbourne. She won a University of Melbourne Excellence Award in 2018 for the transformation of the museums in the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences. Previously Director of Museum and Art Gallery of the Northern Territory and Director Public Programs, National Gallery of Victoria. Jacqueline is committed to community involvement in museums and innovative programs. Please give Jacqueline Healy a very warm welcome. Thank you.
I start also with acknowledgement of country of the Wadawurrung people, who are custodians of the land upon which we now stand, and we pay respect to the elders, past and present, of the Kulin Nation, and extend that respect to other Indigenous Australians. I'm just going to start here with this beautiful image by Deanne Gilson, a Wadawurrung woman. And what I'm going to talk to you about today is the background of the Medical History Museum, and then I'm going to take you through some of the innovations that have been happening at the University of Melbourne in this space, and talk about the opening exhibition that we'll have at our newly relocated museum at 233 Bouverie Street. The building we were in before was demolished, and I have no pictures of what the new space will look like because we're not quite there yet. So that will be a surprise when we do open in September. What we have in that amazing image is baskets of fruit to prepare a meal for their family, the women sharing stories and going about their daily routines under the night sky. The Southern Cross and Emu constellation depict time and the changing seasons, and the eel caught in the hand-woven baskets, and the Murong daisy tuber is crushed and ready to eat. This is what we've been doing at the University of Melbourne. We've been engaging with Indigenous communities, and their art is sharing their rich cultural traditions in relation to medicine. I also want to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people on the land on which I work, and when we celebrated 150 years of the Melbourne Medical School, we commissioned a possum skin coat by Mandy Nicholson, which is now worn in all our graduation ceremonies, which acknowledged our students and welcomed them to country. The Medical History Museum, part of it is Heritage Pharmacy, Savoury and More Pharmacy, that came from London. It used to operate round the corner from Buckingham Palace, and when it was decommissioned in the mid-1960s, the Wellcome Trust gifted it to the University of Melbourne, and it was installed in the Medical History Museum in the Brownless Biomedical Library. And this is one of the things that we currently have dismantled and are moving. I'm going to just give you a quick rundown on the history of Melbourne Medical School and how our museum relates to it. Melbourne Medical School was founded in 1862 by Anthony Collis Brownless, and that's a picture of him as a young man. It was in fact set up to be equivalent, the course to be equivalent to the major courses that were undertaken in Europe. I'm actually currently working with St Andrews University, where Brownless did most of his qualifications, to actually have an exchange research program to acknowledge that beginning. And in 1876, the School of Medicine became the Faculty of Medicine. And here we have some of the key players here, Professor Halford, who was our first Professor of Medicine. When Melbourne Medical School was founded in 1862, it had 3 students, no building, and a lecturer. It didn't have a professor, he came the year after. And what I often say to students to actually help them remember things is, does anyone know who the macadamia nut is named after? And the answer is usually no. Well, I can tell you today. It is named after the first lecturer in the medical school at the University of Melbourne, John McAdam. And why was it named after him? Because he was a mate of the Van Muller, the curator of the Botanical Gardens in Melbourne. It was a small place, Melbourne, in 1862. And John McAdam was also umpired what's considered to be the first official game of Australian Rules football, which happened between Scotch College and Melbourne Grammar. And he and another bloke were the 2 umpires. So there we go. After Halford arrived, and then I've put Harry Brooks Allen up there, and he was the first Australian-trained Professor of Medicine at the University of Melbourne. And there you can see all the hospitals that, you know, of course, we're intrinsically linked with. What you might see on YouTube or on the internet because of artificial intelligence is that Sydney Medical School is claimed to be the first medical school in Australia, and that is not correct. They implemented legislation that mentioned a medical school, but it did not come into operation until 20 years after Melbourne Medical School was established. So for 20 years we were the only school in Australia educating Western trained doctors. So we beat Sydney, had to beat them at something, had to be first with something. What we weren't very good at is the education of women doctors. And in 1887, 25 years after the school was established, women got to do medicine at Melbourne. The reason why is Brownless didn't believe that women should go to university, let alone do medicine. And just because of the region we're in, a direct descendant of Anthony Collis Brownless is in fact Billy Brownless. Who would have thought? And I actually have been mentioned on the Footy Show because of that, or the Medical History Museum has been mentioned. And it hasn't been, oh, isn't that amazing connection? He's been mocked because of that connection. But Brownless founded Melbourne Medical School and then went on to be Vice-Chancellor, then Chancellor. He kept women out of doing medicine for an extra 8 years after women had been admitted to the University of Melbourne. In 1887, 7 women started doing medicine at Melbourne Medical School. Now, if this was in a Netflix series, you wouldn't believe me. But what happened is that it was Lillian Alexander and Helen Sexton who wanted to do medicine. Their dads, who were highly influential people, said, even though there's no legal impediment to you getting in, it's better to have a body of applicants. So they put an ad in the newspaper, and 5 other women put their hands up to say they'd like to do medicine. So all 7 of them applied at the same time, and they had to be admitted because there was no legal impediment. Now, then what happened? One of them, Margaret White, topped the course. So if you saw this on a Netflix series, you'd think, oh, they're putting the values of the day today onto the past. She topped the course. They changed all the rules so she could not be the registrar at Melbourne Hospital. And again, what happened, and this is I also share with my students, is that she did not practice. She married a fellow student and had children and didn't practice as a doctor. So it shows what it takes to be at the forefront of social change. These other women were remarkable. They changed the face of medicine in Victoria and had extraordinarily challenging and hard lives, because it's no fun being at the forefront of social change. But wasn't it wonderful? No one was happy with her topping except a few girls. And what happened in 2021, something that is extraordinarily significant, the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences has its first female dean. What is really exciting, and this only happened last week, she will be the interim provost at Melbourne University. She's just taking on that post. So that's an extraordinary example of massive cultural change in a highly conservative faculty that we have. Now, back to the beginning of the museum. The museum began in 1967, and it was with a gift from the Wellcome Trust. They gave funds to Melbourne University to establish a medical history unit and also assistance with establishing a museum. I don't know if any of you have heard of the Wellcome Trust. It's worth $66 billion. Again, I'm not making it up. And it was established by Wellcome, who was a snake oil salesman in America. He went to London, formed a drug company, Wellcome and Burrow, made a fortune, and became a member of the British establishment. So you have the reverse of the old world story, because the new world came to the old world and made it. What was really interesting about Wellcome, he believed that you needed to know where you'd been to know where you're going. So he believed that history was extraordinarily important in understanding how we make new innovations into the future. We have the AMA collection, which we got gifted in 2012, but it's been our responsibility since the 1990s. And that began with the first Western trained doctors coming to Victoria. So we've got a rich early collection, even though we actually only got established in 1967. I've just got my favourite doctor up there, Beanie, and I often ask students if any of them shop at the Louis Vuitton shop. Do people know where it is in Melbourne? That gorgeous building in Russell Street. Well, that was Beanie's house. So he was one of our early doctors. He built that house, and he was known as Diamond Jim and Champagne Jimmy. Wore diamond rings during the operations and drank champagne, hopefully only after them. But he was a raconteur and extraordinarily wealthy. And what he did when he died, in his will, he left an extraordinary bequest to the University of Melbourne. So he's actually the first major donor to the University of Melbourne as well. And when Melbourne Hospital moved from Swanston Street to where it is today, he was very annoyed because he couldn't walk to work in that regard. I'll just quickly run through the range of things we have. There's our first professor's microscope, Halford's, amputation kit that was gifted to us, that was used in the Battle of Waterloo. We've got photography there on the left. We have Cade. John Cade, who identified the use of lithium in the treatment of mental health, who transformed how people are treated as whole people after his experiences in a prisoner of war camp during World War II. He was in Changi. He is the Australian who should have got a Nobel Prize, because the discoveries he made in relation to mental health are equivalent to the discovery of penicillin. Why didn't he? Because a really humble, self-deprecating man who really was uncomfortable about his own prominence, but extraordinarily significant. There we have our wonderful first women students. And again, Eric Thack, those remarkable drawings there. But what he did to make a buck, he did medical illustration. And isn't that just exquisite? And why that is important now is we don't do that anymore. With microsurgery, we don't need to do those cuts. So that's very important in terms of recording the history of that technique. Now, what did we do in 2012? It was the 150th anniversary of Melbourne Medical School. We did highlights of the medical collection. And that's that book. That's the AMA archive I referred to. Amazing original material. When we came to working on our World War I exhibition, when everyone was doing one a few years ago, we found in our archive trench maps. They were roneoed off every day, and it showed the doctors the safest way to take those stretchers out so they could get their patients safely to medical treatment. And they were issued every day because the war, the trench warfare changed and was so volatile. And we've got that original material in our archive and many other amazing things. Now, at the 50th anniversary of the museum, we decided we had to re-look at our collection and critique it. And what we discovered is that we had not adequately covered our First Nations people's contribution. And we also had done research that had indicated that our medical students didn't want to go and work with Aboriginal communities because they thought things were hopeless. And we realised that in fact they were only getting one part of the picture. And how could we change that? It was by sharing, by working with Aboriginal communities to share the rich knowledge. So why aren't we as impressed by the knowledge of our Indigenous people in terms of healing practice and bush medicine as we are by Chinese medical practice? Because 50,000 year head start our First Nations people had in terms of that knowledge that is acquired through trial and error, the empirical method that is the basis of all discovery. So this is what we did. We created a new collection, and we sharing the stories of bush medicine as a way of passing it down to elders. But it was also approaching these communities to see what they wanted to share with us. This work is in 65,000 Years, A Short History of Australian Art, which I'll talk about soon, which is currently on at the University of Melbourne. Now, what the University of Melbourne has done, and we are at the moment, we're the first, but we're also the first and only university to critique its own practices when it comes to the treatment of First Nations people. We have had a history of collecting human remains. We've had anthropology, a whole range of practice. So this remarkable book that got released last year, and another volume is actually coming out in July. Oh, actually it's next week. Actually covers the various aspects of systemic prejudice in terms of academic practice throughout the University of Melbourne. The book is not an easy read, but until the eve of its launch, the university was still waiting on the possibility of a legal writ being issued to stop the distribution of the book. What it is, interestingly, what's in it is all on the public record. It's all in official documents of the university. It's not hidden, and that's what the research has brought out. And it is an extraordinary first for a university. Why we were able to do this is we had a Vice-Chancellor called Duncan Maskell, who's gone back to the UK. So he came in as an outsider. He was so deeply moved by the welcome to country that he received by the Wurundjeri people that actually created the focus for his term at the University of Melbourne. And it's a remarkable legacy that he's left. This is I'm sorry for the fuzzy image. This is Indigenous Knowledge, Australian Perspectives, that has also just recently been released, which brings together Indigenous knowledge in a whole range of fields, from architecture to healing, that's recently been launched. Why I'm also mentioning these books is that a contribution about the museum's contribution to this process is in each of one of them. And then there's a short history of Australian art that is currently on at the University of Melbourne, which I think actually takes us to a different level when it comes to an Aboriginal art exhibition because of the work of Marcia Langton. She's been working on the show for over a decade, and also the section that the museum that I'm involved in worked on significantly, which is the eugenics section. There's a section where you have to be 18 or over to go into, which delves into eugenics. And we were the leaders in Australia. Berry was the leader. He was Professor of Anatomy and Pathology, and it looks at the documentation, the instruments we used, and the consequences of that, the grave robbing, a whole range of issues that are just facts that need to be acknowledged and addressed. Now I'm starting on now finally talking about my collection, and I'm starting with two cases, and one on the left is a case that was used by Dr. Napthine in the Port Fairy area in the 1890s. And there we go, he's got everything you can imagine in there that is needed at a chemist to make whatever potion is appropriate for the patient. And what I've put next to it is a case, Yorta Yorta Medical Kit by Trina Ham. Now, she is an artist we commissioned to be part of our collection. And what she's saying to us is that we're only going to take her bush medicine healing practices seriously if she puts it in a kit. She puts it in our terms, so we might look at it in our way, so we will show that respect. Now, the thing about Napthine, chemist at Barwon Heads, run by a direct descendant, and also one of the recent Premier of Victoria, a direct descendant as well. There we go. And there we have some of the medicines that are used. The good thing about that era of medicine, everything had a bit of opium or heroin in it, so pick-me-ups were readily available. I now have a poisons permit that I have to govern my museum under, which is very strict for that reason. And then this is Trina's medical kit. What she's done is she's used all the elements that were traditionally used for medical practice in her area, in Yorta Yorta, and she has shared that with us. And one of the most remarkable things about putting this collection together is that people have shared their knowledge. And with some of the works we get one line. In others, we get beautiful explanations because people are making a choice about the information they wish to share with us. And then I have for over 25 years been going to a remote area Aboriginal community in the middle of the Tanami Desert called Wirramanu or Balgo. and it was established as a mission. People went in there because the choice was, who do you want to deal with? The miners, the pastoralists, or the church? And they decided the church might be the lesser evil of the options. And Samplai Napinjan encouraged his people to go to the mission at Valgo for that reason. This is a work that we commissioned for our first Art of Healing exhibition, and I'm about to talk to you about the second one, which we use. This is now on the front cover of the strategic directions plan for the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences to 2030. We have used it as an example of collaboration because these healers have shared with us the medicines that they have authority over, but they only have the power to heal properly when they all come together and share their knowledge. So it's a beautiful example of the power of collaborative practice. And I recently had two of these artists came and visited, Imelda Yukambari and Miriam Badjo, and they were just so excited. They had been told, we'd got permission from them to use the image and all those right things, but they took back 20 corporate plans to share with the community because their work was on the cover. I don't think anyone's going to read it. But now I'm showing this as well. This was a healing basket that we commissioned for our first show. It's currently in 65,000 Years, A Short History of Australian Art. And how we've worked with the artworks, and we've done this again with our second exhibition, we have worked closely with the artists or with art centres, and we've talked to them about what they would like to do and what we would like to have shared. We haven't been prescriptive, we've just kept it open. And one of this fabulous artworks, which I just love because it's about well-being, and the children are happy when they eat these plants, is that this series of work, which has come from Many Hands Workshop in Alice Springs, the art centre there, and it's from people who come from that Hermansburg community, that this was a series of work that was put together for a show at the Botanical Gardens as part of the Tenanthi Indigenous Festival 2 years ago. So we actually bought that whole exhibition to be part of our collection. What we have done, and this is a first, and we've currently got an ARC grant, which is looking at how we most effectively record and document Indigenous art. And this is the protocol we've put in place through our collection of including language, including country as in traditional country, including artist location, and including skin. So in a label, people get that wealth of information about Indigenous people don't necessarily live on their traditional country and how people have moved about. This is by Ilawanti Ken, and this work, and she is an Angkari, a healer, traditional healer. Why I'm showing this is that the first Art of Healing exhibition toured to London and Berlin. It went to King's College London and then to the Medical History Museum in Berlin. At King's College London, Panti and Renchidi came with us, and there they are with Ilawanti's work. We're in the Strand in London. It's just one of my favourite photographs I'm sharing with you. I'm also sharing it with you because we gave that work to King's College London, and they love it, they cherish it, they display it frequently. Still breaks my heart that I had to part with it from my collection, but that's what we did with the show in London and in Berlin. We gifted a work that would become a part of those collections. So there was an ongoing dialogue in that area. And that's the first catalogue that we did. We're about to produce another one. Who are the Nankari? The Nankari are the traditional healers, and they have various names. Mapan is another name that is used, different names in different language groups. And
at the Royal Melbourne Hospital, there is a partnership with the Nankaree from the Women's Council in Alice Springs. The healers from the Women's Council in Alice Springs go into hospitals in Alice Springs and elsewhere and work side by side with Western trained medical doctors. This is one of them, Marinka Burton, and this is an image of her country, the caterpillar dreaming, and you can feel those caterpillars moving across that canvas, and the beautiful terrain of the Tali, the sandhills that are there. So what we are using the art to do, and this art, when it's not in an exhibition, is spread throughout the faculty. So in the Marinka Burton work is actually in the office of the head of Melbourne Medical School. So there we have our top healer training in Western medicine style, has an image from a leading Nankaree in his office. Marpan is helicopter. He's from Balgo, the community I just mentioned that I have a lot to do with. I actually went to Balgo and filled in at the Arts Centre. I've done that many times. I had a crushed hand and I had it in a sling, and they watched me for a week, and at the end of one day, helicopter with 2 other senior men came to me and asked me to stay behind. They threw away the sling, and helicopter took my hand and manipulated it while the other 2 senior men sang. The pain was excruciating. I'm just not going to sugarcoat this. I had known those people for a very long time. I knew they liked me. I rang Ken that night. I said, I think I've sacrificed my right hand for cross-cultural communication. The stinging was unbelievable. I woke up in the morning and it was fine. My hand had been totally realigned. And so we had Brandy and Jumpo giving direction, and helicopter did the implementation. And the hand has been amazing ever since. So it's just an interesting fact, and I think it's just something we need to remember when we think about that concept of terra nullius, what it did to how we view the cultural and intellectual contribution of our First Nations people. And here I think is just a fact that makes us think about what that might mean. When we have the first Mohawk doctor graduated from the University of Toronto in 1866, and we have our first Aboriginal First Nation person, 1983, graduating from the University of WA. A year later, Ian Anderson graduated from the University of Melbourne. It just gives us a sense of how Indigenous people, being our wards until the 1960s, affected them in many ways in that regard. And just here's some of the graduates from the university. There are many now in medicine. Now here we have a beautiful work by Ned Grant, and this shows the waterways under the ground. Why we purchased this is because a few years ago, University of Melbourne, a committee established there got awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for its anti-nuclear stance. And how we've commemorated that is by purchasing works from communities that were affected by the tests at Maralinga. And this is one of those works, because one of the things that they were deeply concerned about was, well, the consequences on those communities are ongoing in terms of the impact of those blasts. Now here we have a work by Diane Gilson. This will be in our show, and this is looking at again, the medicinal properties of plants. She's also put together that thing about her heritage, the use of gold in her painting, and one of the beautiful lines she has, that the real gold in Ballarat is my people, which I think is just such a wonderful line. Here is a healing mat by Cassie Leatham. She runs workshops with First Nations youth in Victoria and has done extraordinary research on the medicinal practices of First Nations people in Victoria. And this is a remarkable mat that she's put together with native grasses and emu feathers. There's been a whole series of workshops that have been developed with young people, young Indigenous people, and they have been taken to a particular area. These are kids that are having a hard time, and they've been connected to elders and reconnected to their culture. I've got special permission from the makers of this item. I've got some others in the collection that we can share their names and share the story of their journey in terms of the recovery of self-esteem and mental health. I don't know if any of you remember that First Encounters exhibition that came to Australia. It was at the National Museum, which brought out items from the British Museum that had been collected here in early white settlement times and discovery times. And one of the items was a kelp container such as this. So that practice of making those kelp containers had ceased. So it was, in fact, and I'm saying this because museums don't always do the right thing, but occasionally what they do can actually help people. And here is an instance where it has, that kelp container that came from the British Museum was used to re-inspire that practice among Indigenous people in Tasmania. And that is how the tradition has been revived. My interest from a medical history perspective in that kelp container is that it not only was used because, of course, the water can't get through the kelp, was also used because kelp contains iodine. So it was sterilised water. So this is the thing about knowledge, isn't it? The use of that was to ensure they were drinking clean water. And this has been a revived practice, and we're very lucky to have that in the collection. This is from Ernabella, a beautiful piece of ceramics, but why it's in the collection here at the Medical History Museum is because witchetty grubs, and some of you might have tried them, are good for mental health. They were seen as brain food. So we've incorporated that into the knowledge base we have through our collection. Here we have a beautiful work which looks at, from Mari Majida, that looks at traditional birthing practices, and why it's so important to include the skin where possible in our labels is to refer to the system that was throughout Australia. It's a different system on the Tiwi Islands, which is about how people in a community relate to each other, and it also determines who people can marry. So it's why when people first arrived in Australia, non-Indigenous people, the communities were extraordinarily healthy, even though they were in relatively small groups, because there were very strict rules about who you could marry. And what we have here with this birthing practice is the people of the right skin, the skin of the mother could be there with the birthing of the baby, and the skin that did not relate to that mother, those people were not part of that, and it's the way the community operates and works effectively. Here we have bush fix which this is again a work by Vanessa Inkamala from Many Hands in Alice Springs. And again, we're looking at the use of eucalyptus leaves and being pounded and used as medicine and put on your chest like Vicks Vapor Rub. So again, that's a bit of a nod at us and a bit of a joke. Here we have extraordinary examples. That body of work I talked about before that we've purchased that was prepared for the Tenanthi exhibition. And here we have a Hermannsburg pot. So that first Hermannsburg pot I told you, made by Judith Inkamala, what we did is we went back to Judith and we said, we want more pots, but we want you to be the person who determines who does the pots and what's on them. And so we've got 7 pots that will be part of our new exhibition, and Judith has chosen the artist, so we've got some younger members of the community, and she's contributed some pots as well. But I love this one because it talks about how you get the bush medicine for the baby to a drink. You put it on the nipple and it's distributed that way. And also the smoking ceremony of newly born babies, of clearing the lungs. Here we have a remarkable work from Ada Puller-Beasley. This was recently on in an exhibition at Alcaston Gallery, and it points to her country. So what we did is we went to her and asked her to paint in detail the bush medicine that was in that earlier painting. And with Ada, we're not actually going to find out much about the bush medicine because she's decided, and this is a decision made by a not unusual decision, that some things they just do not wish to share because it's their knowledge and they want to keep it within their community. Here we have a work, because in fact what we try to do is cover Australia. Here we have a work from the Tiwi Islands. Now I'm going to touch on this work because it's particularly special, because what we try and do is when we're commissioning these works, we look at to build on the relationships that we already have. And so we have been, as in I'm talking about the Faculty of Medicine, Dentistry and Health Sciences, the dental school has been conducting workshops and programs in Arnhem Land for over a decade. We've been sending up our students, we've been sending up our practitioners. So when I was preparing for a dental exhibition, I actually contacted Will Stubbs at the Art Centre there and said that I'd like to commission a work. And he said, what of? And I said, well, I'm not really sure, but I'd like it to have a dental theme if you want that. So what we got was the first teeth sort of story of the Yolngu people. And until this commission, they had not shared this outside that community. And the following year, they actually entered it into the Natsia Art Award. But that came out of the long-term relationship of that community with the University of Melbourne. And what the first tooth story is that it's about the pandanus. So the children's teeth are thrown into the roots of the pandanus plant, and those roots represent the teeth of the shark. So it's that symbol of strength. So the teeth will grow back. They'll get lovely, strong teeth. There's also far more detail about the power of that pandanus plant and all the wonderful properties it has, and those medicinal properties, which I've put there. Part of this process, we also have what Malcolm Yopanda did, is she worked with John Woolsey. There was a big show at the National Museum, and it came to the Museum of Victoria. You might have seen that, in terms of documenting bush medicine and bush food to ensure her community would not forget this. And here we have her daughter continuing that tradition with these beautiful sketches. There are 6 of them of different medicinal plants. This is the old museum, because the new museum, I haven't got a picture that I can share because there are too many items that won't be there forever still in that space. It's still being refurbished. And we reopen at our new location on the 25th of September with our latest Art of Healing exhibition. And it's in a 1-storey building. It was originally a childcare facility. It's been beautifully refurbished. And we'll have the heritage pharmacy reinstated. We also have 3 cases that were in the first exhibition at the Royal Exhibition Building, and they have been restored. Someone had restored them in the 1990s and used bronze paint. Now they're being restored with gold leaf, as they originally would have, and they are quite magnificent as well. So there's plenty to see, but what will be the heart of this new exhibition is what we learn from our First Nations people. We're also doing a very significant commission from Kayla Arts in Shepparton. They are still working on it. That's why I haven't got an image to share with you now, looking at the traditional practices in that region. And I just wanted to end with this beautiful image of bush medicine from Ambudawatch, because their view, that's all they paint. They don't share their dreaming stories, their Jukuba stories, they just share their bush medicine. So thank you for listening, and I hope you come and see us at 233 Bouverie Street.
Thanks a lot for watching.